it's Dr. Parikh. So this is the Genogram project. This comes near the end of the course. In Module 6, we spend a lot of time talking about relationships, family relationships, romantic partnerships, and a little bit about friendships as well, which I think are really important, but there's not as much information about. So as part of this, you're going to create a 4-generation genogram. I imagine most students will do their families, so you can do your family, but you could also choose a historical family or a fictional family, as long as there's a lot of information. So typically a movie isn't going to be a good option for this. You're not going to get enough information to score full points, but a book series or even a long-running TV show, I don't recommend doing this, but Game of Thrones, there would probably be plenty of information to do genograms, and you could probably find things to get you started online. But that, I think the genogram would be so complex there that it wouldn't be useful. You need a very particular level of complexity to work well for this. I think historical, like actual people, are a better bet if you want to do that. And there's 2 options. So there's one option where you create your own genogram. There's another option that I'll talk about at the end, where you can use a genogram that already exists and do more of an analysis on it. So you're not creating the genogram, but you're doing more work on the other end. Something just looked odd, sorry. So first, so we're going to talk about genograms. There's more information. This is not all of the information you'll need to do the entire project. And there's also a lot of links to sources. Where? I wonder where are those links? So let me see. So genogram assignment. I think I know what's happening. So I have a different file where I have this information. And I think some of these didn't get copied over. Yeah, I'm going to update this syllabus to have this information. But for now I'm going to use over here because it's tough because I like to include really detailed information about projects in the syllabus, but then it just gets hard to track because then it becomes really unwieldy. So symbols, there are sort of standard symbols and formats for genograms. A genogram is like a family tree with special symbology and information. So you want to make sure, gender has specific things. There's also family structure and relationships. There's a few that are super standard, like how you represent marriages and children, and then you can, there's a lot more that are kind of more specialized that you can use. So there's a few links. I'll pop some of them open just to see. But these are just, I thought they were good resources. And these are part of your readings for that module too, I think. So you can see some of the typical genogram symbols. And they have a nice summary of relationships and things. You can print it if you want to. And here's another one. It's very similar. So this kind of helps you think through different specific situations. And you can always label, like if you're not sure if you want to use sort of a more nuanced symbol, I would recommend also adding a label. Some of them, like kind of a scratchy line, that's probably pretty common. But for example, if you want to, it can be hard to know what is hostile and what is violence. So you may want to, it just is often helpful. And this has some different colors to symbolize things. It's up to you. I really care that you use the most basic sort of thing. This upper square kind of represents what I'm most interested in. And I'm more about whether it's clear and neat and organized than about whether you exactly do the formal structure. You can use whatever format you want. There are genogram makers you can find online. You could use a family tree maker maybe and then kind of tweak it. You can also, you could start out with a piece of poster board and some post-it notes and kind of shuffle everybody on and then take a picture of it. I'm pretty flexible with how you want to do it. So what you need to do, you're looking, so people on the board, you typically, or on your genogram, you want their name, their important dates, so typically birth date, death date. It's often helpful to include the cause of death. So it might be cancer, it might be a car accident, and then relationships, particularly marital relationships or cohabitations or whatever, and parent-child relationships. And you would include any marriage you would typically include, so previous marriages. Other than marriage, it kind of becomes a judgment call, how significant of a relationship goes on a genogram. And partly it's a function of time. So if someone was in a 5-year non-marriage relationship and they just broke up a year or two ago, then that former partner probably belongs on the genogram because they're still a big part of the family story. But if there was a 5-year non-marriage relationship that happened 10 years ago, I don't know how much I would care to include it in the genogram at this point. You want to include at least 4 generations. So that's you, your parents, your grandparents, and your great-grandparents. Typically, most people have access to information about themselves, their parents, and their grandparents, at least pretty rough information. And if you add great-grandparents, you might not know offhand, but typically if you can ask a parent, an aunt, and uncle, that's their grandparents, so they're very likely to know. And so your 4 generations, that would include miscarriages and divorces. If you are only in touch with one side of your family, you can include, just include as much information as you have. If you have, kind of bonus family through adoption or through just kind of, I have a bonus family that I'm not legally connected to in any way, but they're an incredibly important part of my life. And so my genogram gets very complicated because I have both sides of my family, which includes some remarriages. I've got my husband's family that I'm very much a part of, and then I've got my bonus family. And so I might sort of do a few different sheets of genograms. If I really wanted to capture my family, I might also choose to just focus on my biological family or just on, the people that we interact with most from the other families. So it's really important. I want you to go backward with detail. So get, as much information as you have access to, both your parents, both your grandparents, both your great-grandparents. Aunts, uncles, and cousins, that's going to depend on you and how close you are to them and how central you see them to your family. So your generation, you and your partner, and you want to have all of your full, half, and step siblings, any marriages, any kids. So you may actually end up with 5 generations on there if you have children, if your generation has any children. Second generation, that's your parents, and I would like you to include your parents' siblings and their spouses. I'll leave, I'll just say, give names and dates for closest. I say 6 here, but if you've got a whole, if you've got 10 people represented just in your siblings and partners, don't worry too much if you can't do names and dates, but do at least give me a sense of how many children your aunts and uncles have. And if you don't know, just make it clear that you don't know, question marks. Third generation, so your grandparents, give me names and dates, and same thing for your great-grandparents, and cause of death as much as possible, if for any who have died. So I'm giving rough guidelines just so that it's clear whether you've done what I've asked you to do or not, but I'm also trying to leave flexibility because I know that family structures vary, access to information varies, and if, this project can be a really interesting opportunity to gather family history, especially some of you, are still very young adults, and so you may have heard stories about great-grandpa before, but when you start asking now, there's a couple pieces. One is that your parents will see you, as you grow. Parents typically entrust children with more information about what was happening in families. I just recently found out that my grandparents were separated for years before they actually got divorced, and they were legally still married, I think they were legally separated but not divorced when my parents got married. I did not know that at all. So, information comes out slowly, often, over time, and so this can be an interesting way to get more information. It also, to think of it, I probably should have had the date of their divorce on my genogram. Maybe I just didn't do the math. Brain focus. Got so distracted by that. So it can be an interesting way to learn family stories. I also want to recognize that it may be difficult to talk to family. And so that's why I'm trying to be flexible on how much information you have on here. But you also always have the option to do a fictional family, or to go with one, or a historical, to do a genogram about another family and just look up, as much information as you can. So it would have to be a pretty well-known family, or I have access to some genograms and information I can give you, and then you can do kind of some analysis and write-up on that. You also want to, at a minimum, I also want you to kind of note particularly close and particularly difficult relationships. And that's, I think you could ask family members just in that way. If you want to go gently, you can just say, was there anyone in the family, or who in the family was grandma closest to? Or, were any of the relationships, ever strained or difficult? And then this last piece, you get to choose what you want to track. I want you to choose to track one more thing in this genogram. And if you look at some of these, not that one, but so for example, here there's different symbols for kinds of abuse and neglect. And then here it is. And I don't care if you use these symbols and colors, but it just kind of gives you a sense of things you could be tracking. So physical and mental illness, drug and alcohol use, medical conditions. You could look at things like education, career choices. You don't have to go for like painful things in the family. You can also look at kind of strains of who's more extroverted versus more introverted, religion. I'm really open to what you want to track, but I want you to track something else and kind of look at patterns in the family of who is and who isn't doing whatever it is that you're looking at. You'll also have a paper that goes with it, about 600 words, so that should be around 2 to 3 pages, double-spaced, blah, blah, blah. It needs to be organized and easy to read, with strong sentence structure and grammar. But it doesn't have to be, it's not like it doesn't need to be as professional and polished as I look for in, say, a literature review. I want you to refer to the book or to other readings at least twice, and really show that you've thought about how ideas about relationships and family systems fit with the family, with the system you're looking at. And remember, you always choose what to disclose. You choose what you disclose to me. You choose what you disclose in the discussion boards, and you choose what you disclose in class conversations. I am not pushing anyone to tell me their family secrets, and my hope is to not drag up really difficult relationships for people either, which is why I'm trying to offer as much flexibility as I can. And I'm also acknowledging that there may be questions that are very difficult to get answered within the family. You may not be in contact with people, or, you may just not have information about things. I haven't mentioned this at all, but it probably would be helpful to track cultural identification, particularly if you have kind of a variety, immigration, or even relocations, who moves versus who stays in the same place. Yeah. I'm just thinking now about the relocations. I mean, immigration, I think of my husband's family a good bit. But even with relocations, it's interesting, thinking about my family. My father's brother, it's kind of like the oldest child is the furthest, moved an hour and a half or so away, 2 hours away maybe. The middle child moved about an hour away, and the youngest child lives probably 10 or 15 minutes away. And so there's this kind of stratification of where people ended up settling down. And then my family, my brother and I, both moved around quite a bit and are pretty far away from home. It's just interesting to think of patterns and to think, and to kind of think, does that mean something? Does it not? There's just a lot that's interesting. So the alternative assignment, I'm just going to pop this down to make it easier to look at everything on one page. So I have one book in particular that has some options. There's another book I might get, because I think it might be really neat to look at when I do my lectures for this topic. But I love Monica McGoldrick's work. I've heard her speak. I totally have an academic crush on her. So I have one book that has genograms, and I can probably get another one as well. And for those little snippets, I don't mind sending you a PDF of some pictures of things. If it's a whole book, I get really uncomfortable with making things too available. But for this, I don't mind just sending you a snippet. So the paper, instead of 600 words, it's meant to be longer, 900 words. I would probably put a little more pressure on the clarity and the writing in that case. I would have slightly higher expectations. I would want you to tie things to the book a little bit more, 3 references, and then here's the biggie. I also want you to be pulling in at least one other scholarly source. So instead of doing the legwork to put together the genogram, you're doing the legwork to kind of find outside sources to get a more deep analysis of what's happening. And these descriptions, it has the genogram, and then it also has some narrative describing what's happening and kind of giving their perspective, because it's McGoldrick and Walsh writing this. The one I have is focused on the effects of grief in families and looking at how grief affects generations. But there's another one that I might get that I think is a little more broad. So if you don't want to do your family for whatever reason, I don't think I have that extra information on here. It's in the syllabus. But you can also, you could do your own genogram of a different family. or you could do a slightly different assignment with an existing genogram. So you have a few options there. This, I don't know why this comes up so weird. I don't know how to make it not look like that. But it's just one assignment. Just one assignment. And this, I probably will have to tweak it a little bit. I don't know why it's not coming up. Oh, because I have to choose which one I want. So I may have to tweak it a little bit because I've adjusted some of the things, but it should be pretty close to accurate. If anything here seems funny to you when you look at it, let me know. And then there's also the alternate assignment. Yeah, those all, I think I might have updated those already. And then I think there's a Blackboard assignment. Some of the discussions, I think, touch on the genogram. Yeah, what did you learn from doing a genogram? And then there's some questions up here that kind of talk about families and systems. So the genogram will help you answer that. All right, I think that's that assignment pretty thoroughly. So that should be all of our assignments. Again, it's several projects and papers, but there's no quizzes, there's no tests. I think it's still very much in line with a 200 level class, where a lot of the focus is on discussing, both online and in person, or, it has to be at least some online, and then the mix of online to in person is kind of up to you. The easiest way to find when anything is due is to go to the Blackboard calendar, and I'm not putting specific due dates in the syllabus, partly because if things get really weird, I want to have more flexibility to push deadlines back if I need to. I will never make things earlier, only later. All right, take good care. Bye-bye.